Okay, so this is an introduction to Hamlet, Prince of Denmark by William Shakespeare. So you're probably wondering, what is the big deal with Shakespeare? Why do we still study this great writer? And what is the point, really? Obviously, if you did last night's reading into the language and you saw the impact that he had on the English language itself, you could see why perhaps you could see that he had a big impact on the English language. Um, some other reasons, perhaps, is that the themes of his plays and the writing basically transcend time. In 1998, for example, there was a play, excuse me, there was a movie titled Shakespeare in Love about the life and time of William Shakespeare. And it actually ended up winning the Oscar for the best film. It captured the hearts of many moviegoers. And so, even in our modern audience and the modern moviegoers who can be kind of hard to please and fickle, they saw the importance of such a great writer and the influence that he had, and saw this film as an important piece of history. Um, Another example to provide you with to the importance and the long lasting influence that Shakespeare had. When the attacks of 9/11 occurred, there was a US senator who actually quoted Shakespeare, and it's just one of the many examples of when you can't say what you can really when you find it difficult to be able to articulate your feelings. Usually Shakespeare has a way to go about saying that. And the US senator said, and I quote, "Shakespeare wrote, 'Grief hath changed me since you saw me last. We are all changed. Yesterday changed all of us.'" End quote. So as you can see, despite the plays, the plot lines, the conflicts, the intricate relationships, the themes, and the language used in these plays, you'll see that as we go on here that there's a lot more to Shakespeare than meets the eye. Okay, so getting into tragedy itself, just doing a little comparison here. And again, some of this is going to be a little repetition from what you did in your reading, but that's all right. Greek tragedy, like something like Oedipus Rex or Antigone. Greek tragedy is going to focus on a noble hero who has a tragic flaw, which is also called hamartia. The fall that a noble hero encounters, the fall from grace, the 180 that takes place within the play, because the noble hero is just that. They're not some average Joe, they're someone to be admired and placed on a pedestal. They fall from grace not because of just kind of some simple misstep or some sort of just unlucky uh, mistake that they make. It is because of some sort of actual character flaw. Something like maybe they are power hungry, or they are not very trustworthy, or in the case of Romeo and Juliet, we know that they were very impulsive. They did not think before they acted. So when we see that fall, when we see them go from being kind of happy-go-lucky, everything's going right in the world, to down on their luck and just everything's going terribly for them, it elicits this feeling of sorrow, pity, terror, maybe a kind of a combination of those emotions throughout the course of the play from the audience. And by the end of the play, the reader, the viewer, does not feel sad. You're not crying. You're not overly emotional in that way, because you've undergone catharsis. And catharsis is the purging of emotions, where by the end, you actually end up feeling enlightened and ennobled, and you feel like you have a better grasp of the human condition and what makes a person who they are, and how humans can make mistakes, and how you can, be too full of yourself, and how that can get in your way, and how you should sort of learn from those flaws through these characters. Okay, so that's the main aspect of a tragedy. You can't feel that sort of connection if it's just, again, some sort of average Joe, or if it's some sort of just kind of oops, some sort of random mistake, some sort of just bad luck thing that happened. It has to be some sort of actual character, personality flaw, that tragic flaw, that hamartia. Okay, so in the case of Hamlet, what gets a little confusing is that Hamlet is the name of the play. Hamlet is the main character. Hamlet is also the name of Hamlet's dead father. So does not always get easy. So we will clarify that a little bit more in class on Friday. I'll do some drawing on the board and we will get that clarified. So Hamlet is a nobleman striving to restore order in the world around him, but that restoration that he tries to put in place comes at a price. Okay, as he tries to restore everything, as he tries to set things right, his life pays the forfeit. Spoiler alert: most tragedies, if you're the main character and the play is named after you and it's a tragedy, you're probably gonna die. Okay, just spoiler alert. So Hamlet does not move from a state of happiness to a state of suffering like most Renaissance tragedies. He actually is suffering from the beginning of the play. And so we'll talk a little bit about what is really causing that suffering. But it's a little different. And some of the notes that will follow in this PowerPoint and in this conversation will relate back to that. And so when you hear me talking about the human body and what it's made up of and everything, that'll kind of play back into Hamlet and what he's suffering from. I'm not just going off the deep end, I promise. So it's not just about the tragic hero, though. Usually tragedies and plays have more to do with also politics, murder, domestic issues, family issues. It's way more than just like one person and their issues. So even if you kind of go back again to Romeo and Juliet, family drama involved there as well. So, okay, so some Renaissance beliefs. Again, some of these are going to come into play, which is why they are listed right here, but they believe that reason led to virtue, that order led to reason. So they just liked everything neat and orderly, and just you think through things. They did not like crazy, outlandish beliefs. Love was an ideal. Lust was a rejection of God-given reason. The idea and belief in ghosts is that it's a hallucination, a spirit returned to perform some deed left undone in life. It was a ghost is seen as a spirit or an omen of something dreadful, maybe returned from the grave by divine permission or disguised as a dead person. So again, that will all come into play. The nature of evil is that it's an inherent defect, like that you are not, that it's not like your responsibility to be good or to be bad, that if you are evil, it's like you're like born evil, like that you're the victim of fate if you're evil. So that's something kind of interesting, something a little bit different. So the idea of complexions, it basically, they believe that the human body was comprised of 4 substances called humors: sanguine, melancholic, choleric, and phlegmatic. Basically, any excess or deficit of any of these different substances would cause the body to just be diseased or just off in some way. So intellectuals, so those that were incredibly smart, were believed to be especially susceptible to melancholy, so to depression. So according to theorists, the melancholy individual was prone to dwelling at inordinate length upon his difficulties, real or imagined, but so far from remaining lethargic, he often would become hysterical and would act impulsively. So this is what was believed during the Renaissance. And then also belief was that man possesses habits or flaws that overthrow reason. Okay. Some Renaissance influence on the setting that will come into play. The hierarchy creation. So imagine that you have like a be like a ladder or a pyramid. Angels are at the top of the hierarchy of creation. Um, beast at the bottom. Man in between. Man's ability to reason made him closer to angels, which angels are considered symbols of pure virtue. Reason had to overcome passion, grief, bestiality in order for man to be virtuous. So just imagine that, like, you have to think your way through all these like crazy emotions. Like, you can't feel these emotions. You have to think your way through it all and just like get your brain on the straight and narrow. That's kind of a little bit about how they thought and how they believed. Intemperance was viewed as a rejection of reason. Mankind remains tainted from original sin, therefore, the ghost represents the imperfect man or mortal. Again, this whole ghost thing's going to come up very early on in the play. Very, very early on. Elizabethans. So that's obviously, the term we give to the people in England during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Believed in the divine rights of kings, so that if you were to murder a king, that it was as if murdering, because the king is the god on earth, that it would be like murdering the minister of God on earth. So that's a big no-no. You don't do that. Canonical law said that marriage of a woman to her dead husband's brother was strictly forbidden. So that is based on sacramental view of the mystical bond formed in marriage. So that was like strictly forbidden, would have been probably seen as incestuous. Incest was viewed as an offense not only like between the people involved, but also against the whole of society. And then, of course, suicide would have been viewed as a mortal sin. So a little bit of historical context, and that's where I'm going to stop before I get too long-winded. If you were to stop Billy Shakespeare on the street on a Sunday morning in 1599, the year that Hamlet was written, a few things that would have been on his mind would have been the ever-present threat of the plague. So you were going to see a lot of mention about disease in the play. Not necessarily like literal disease, but also kind of a metaphorical disease. And so the fact that the plague was always kind of like on their mind played a big role in this. There was definitely growing concern over who would be the heir to the throne, because Queen Elizabeth was childless, and of course, this is near the very end of her reign, so what was going to happen there? There were some recent threats from an Irish rebellion and the Spanish Armada, so lots of things going on in terms of like various threats to the safety. And then also William Shakespeare personally had had some problems in his own life with his only son, Hamlet, dying. So obviously there's probably not a coincidence there with Hamlet and Hamlet. Or maybe there is. 1599 was an era of boundless artistic inspiration. There were like tons of plays performed. Shakespeare obviously wasn't the only one. There was Christopher Marlowe, lots of other playwrights throughout. It was very common. They were inspired by international events and events within England, personal events. Most of London was under the age of 20. And, theater was obviously a very common form of entertainment. And so they wrote their plays, they performed the plays, they turned around, they did something else. They continually churned out these plays. And if you ever want to see what that looked like, the performing of the plays, the churning out of the plays, that movie I mentioned at the beginning, Shakespeare in Love, made in 1998. It's an excellent movie to watch that shows that. Okay, so England itself, there were definitely some contradictions in that um, there were a lot of contracted marriages within England. People were married off for wealth, stability, and whatnot in the marriages. But then, like, the plays were filled with passion and love, and just kind of an interesting, ironic kind of twist there. There was a really strong queen, but no heir. And then there was a mandatory monthly church attendance. So, you know, that's kind of a contradiction as well. So this PowerPoint actually goes on and goes into some vocabulary, and then it goes into the background context of the characters within Hamlet itself to set you up before reading the play, because if you just dive right into reading Hamlet, you will be incredibly lost. So I'm going to stop there for today and go over the background and context of the specific characters on Friday, and we will start reading on Friday. So make sure you have listened to this entire thrilling, very thrilling video, PowerPoint. Thanks for following along. It's very late for me, at least, and I hope you guys have a good day.